Hi everyone, and welcome back to Coffee Corner. We are so glad to have you guys back this week for our third week in our study of Haggai. And as we jump into this second sermon, I am so excited. I've done a lot of study on this sermon and in this part of this chapter, so I think it's going to be really exciting, really applicable to where maybe many of us find ourselves right now in this time of life. So if you haven't already, go ahead and read. It is, let me see, Haggai, oops, I'm in Zechariah, that is not the right book. Haggai chapter 2, 1 through 9. If you haven't, go ahead, give it a quick read through, and join me back here when you're finished. Hi y'all, and if this is your first time here at Coffee Corner, my name is Jarina, and we are in the middle of a mini-series in the book of Haggai. And I have one of my absolute favorite mugs. I know you can't really read it because it's backward. I think it's backwards on the video, but it says I really need a day between Saturday and Sunday, and it's so true. And it's a huge mug. Like, this thing is gigantic. I put it in my Keurig, under my Keurig, and you put a large glass, and it's like you could put at least another small cup of coffee in there, maybe even a medium. Like, it is huge. So when I actually get to fill it up, it is so happy. I didn't fill it up all the way. I only put it under the Keurig once. So we'll see. If you need your cup of coffee, go ahead and grab it, and let's dive right in. So I'm not going to read through like every single verse of Haggai, because hopefully you've already done that and really gotten a good feel for this sermon. It's the second sermon of Haggai, and as we saw in the last two times we've talked, is all of these sermons are time stamped. And again, I think that is just so cool that we know the exact day and year and everything that this was written in. So our last one was written in August, and now we're jumping ahead a few months, and it's October. So it's in the 7th month, in the 120th day of the month, came the word of the Lord to the prophet Haggai, saying. So this is the same year, so 520 BC, 520 years before Christ. And then the 7th month, this is a month after our previous message, and it is the 21st day of that month. So if we're translating that over into what our time would be, it's about October 17th, 520 BC. So again, first 1 month after this first sermon had been. And last time we looked, these people were just sort of burnt out. They had come back and just sort of lost their focus, lost their purpose. And in this sermon, he's really going to focus on encouraging or dissolving discouragement. So they've been here a month. They started working on the temple. They've been working on the temple, and honestly, they're starting to finish it. It's starting to actually look like the temple. I'm bringing my mouse over here so I can actually scroll through my notes on my computer. So, we see that the Lord comes to them. It's so often in these prophets, it's the Lord speaking to them. They're not really seeking God. They're not really necessarily crying out to God, although I'm sure there are some individuals that are crying out to God and seeking His guidance. God is always coming to them because God is aware of their work. They're doing this in obedience to Him in His first sermon. They're building the temple, and He's also aware of their weariness. So we saw last time that they're coming back from Jerusalem. They've been working, they stopped, now they're starting to work again. And God in His love and His compassion is moving on the behalf of His people. He's coming to them, He's reaching out to them, and He's caring for them because He sees that even after they've started this work that He put in front of them, they're getting weary, and this timing was so perfect for they're getting discouraged again, and it's in God's perfect timing that the Lord is giving Haggai this message and saying, don't be discouraged. Let me encourage you. And I don't know, we're people so stuck in time. We have to get this done by this point. And, having goals is a good thing. We obviously need to get certain things done by certain times, but sometimes we just have to realize that God's timing isn't our timing, and we work so hard to accomplish certain goals in certain times. And we see in this thing, Israel is working and they're becoming discouraged because of the timing of the work. It just doesn't seem to be moving forward fast enough. And then they look at this temple and there seems to be something in their minds, there's something wrong with it. The people are looking at it and saying something doesn't seem quite right. And they had certain expectations, and those expectations weren't becoming reality. And this is what's putting them in this discouragement. And I think we can all relate of having, expectations, even in the little things. Like for me, getting, a certain amount of things done in a day and not getting it. And there's just sort of this discouragement that settles on you because your expectations weren't met. And if we keep letting that, this little thing not being met and this little thing not being met and this thing not going perfectly as we wanted it to, it gets discouraging and we just get overloaded with discouragement. And then in verse 2, he addresses Zerubbabel, who we looked at last time, was the governor, and Joshua, who was the high priest. And then he says, to the residue of the people. And I think that this is really telling, the Lord recognized that they were this weak, tiny, little group of people. And it wasn't all of Israel that had come back to build Jerusalem. It wasn't even everyone that had lived in Jerusalem or dreamed of going back to Jerusalem. There was just this tiny, tiny little fraction of the people, a residue, the bottom of Israel that came back. And I'm sure that they were aware that there were many people living in Babylon and probably doing quite well for themselves. We see that some people that rose to prominence, in captivity. We see Esther, who became a queen. We see Nehemiah, who was the cupbearer of the king. These were people that were doing very well. And I'm sure that there were quite a few other Jews that were very comfortable in their captivity. They had gotten busy, they had started businesses, they started families, and not everyone came back to Jerusalem. Not everyone sacrificed this. But these people, these residue of the people, they came back. And I'm sure sometimes we were very aware of the fact that they could have been much more comfortable had they stayed in captivity. But this was their passion and their desire to come back. But when things don't go their way and expectations don't get met in the time or the way that they thought it would, I can imagine that desire to just return back to what had become familiar for many of them. Many of them born in captivity, and just feeling all alone and quite low and quite discouraged because they were a residue. They were by themselves. They were being, as we looked at last week, there's problems on so many sides under Nehemiah's leadership, and there's just all this controversy going on, and this temple building is just so slow, and now they're putting it up, and it's just so little. And that's what they start doing. This is the source of their discouragement, is a comparison. So first of all, we see the former is remembered. So God is talking to the people. He's saying, who is left among you that saw this house in her first glory, and how do you see it now? Is it not in your eyes in comparison of nothing? So there were some older people among this group, some people that had seen the temple prior to its destruction, and it was Solomon's temple. It was gold laden and just this beautiful, majestic structure. It was one of the wonders of the world during its time. And I cannot imagine what it would have been like, and just the splendor, and you have God's presence indwelling this temple, and it would just have been so fabulous. And now this tiny, pitiful residue of the people are building this temple back with the wood from the surroundings. And yes, some supplies have been sent to, help with that build, but it's nothing like Solomon's build. Zerubbabel's temple, as it would be known as, was a much smaller version of Solomon's temple. It was tiny. It wasn't these beautiful cedar beams. If you look over in 1 Kings 6, it's talking about the Solomon's temple, and it's the cedar construction. It's completely overlaid in gold. It's huge. Nothing could compare with Solomon's temple. And again, it's where God dwelt. So it was just so overwhelming. And now you have this tiny little wooden temple structure that the people, they're not wealthy. These people aren't. They haven't come from a place of superior wealth. Even those that were doing well in Babylon, they don't have just all this gold and silver to, pour into this temple build. And just like they had this golden moment to look back on this beautiful golden temple. We have those, golden times, golden years. As you get older, you have golden years, and we have those highlight moments in our lives. And physically we do. When we're at the top of our physical condition, and emotionally, where we just feel so wonderful and so stable, and spiritually we have those highs where we feel like we're so close to God. And it makes us glow, and it makes us excited and satisfied when we have those mountaintop experiences, as we might call them. And it's a good thing to, look at the good times that we've had in the past, but we can remember, but we don't want to compare, because as we begin to compare, we sometimes get discouraged. And although, we should remember, and it can bring us strength, and it can bring us encouragement to continue. We can think of, oh, well, this was so good. God was so good here, and he will continue to help me and to strengthen me. Remembering is a good thing. But he asks, and how do you see it now? This is the key. This is why they were discouraged, as they were comparing it. They had fallen into this spirit of comparison, and it was robbing their joy. God had given them this great work of building his house again, but all they could remember were the good times, the better temple, and it was robbing them of what had happened. And if we look back at Ezra, because Ezra and Nehemiah were some of these first people that had come back and first people that had led. And there was, and they had started building the temple, that foundation was laid. And as they're celebrating the foundation of this temple being laid, Ezra tells us about how there are these two groups of people. There are these younger people, the people that were born in captivity, and they're shouting for joy, and they're excited. And you have an older generation who had seen the old temple, and they're weeping, and there's just this turmoil of joy and sadness because of comparison. And think about it, we can get so discouraged, and what is stealing our joy from our present service to God? It's very easy for me to fall into a spirit of comparison, to compare what I am doing now to what I used to be doing, if it was better prior, or compare my work to someone else's or to someone that's more successful. And it quickly robs us of that joy because of what they had once experienced. Their work at this point seemed minuscule and unimportant, but they weren't the people of Solomon's temple. They were the people of this time now, and that's what God had called them to it. God's work at any time and in any proportion is never unimportant. You can be doing the littlest thing for God, and that is important. And that's as monumental of importance as your biggest highlight moment that you've ever had. We can't let the longevity of God's work or comparisons steal our joy from service. And it's something that I struggle with a lot, is this discouragement, this falling into comparison. And it was this time and this comparing of things that were causing these people to be discouraged. And God saw this. He saw that they were comparing themselves and they were just getting tired of how long this was taking. So we see this cause of discouragement, but we also see this admonition to not be discouraged, to be encouraged. So God says, "Yet now be strong, O Zerubbabel, said the Lord, and be strong, O Joshua, son of Josedek, the high priest, and be strong, all ye people of the land, saith the Lord." So he gives this admiration 3 times over. It's the same admonition to 3 different groups. He addresses Zerubbabel, Joshua, and the people, and he says, be strong. And there's one tiny word I want to focus on. It says yet be strong. Yet is a word that is a conjunction. Okay, I'm not going to get all grammatical on you, I promise. But it's a conjunction that often works with God's mercy and long suffering. Abraham stood yet before the Lord and pled for mercy for those that were in Sodom and Gomorrah. And, God in Samuel's time kept calling to Samuel even when yet he didn't know the Lord. When he's calling to him in that dream, he's calling to him. God is a God of yets. He gives us second chances. He doesn't just leave us in our despondency and our discouragement. And we may be able to, despite our circumstances or despite our background, that yet God, we can experience that. God takes joy in taking broken people, discouraging situations, and working in them, working through them. And we serve a God who doesn't leave us in despair. He reaches out and says, yet be strong. This is Haggai's rallying cry in this sermon. It's almost the middle of his sermon. He's saying, be strong, be strong, be strong. And he says it 3 times. I really think that's partially for emphasis. And where does this strength come from? They're surrounded by sort of this dismal Jerusalem. Their houses are looking in better shape, but the temple, is looking pretty dinky and pretty compared to Solomon's temple. And their strength doesn't depend on their circumstances. It's God calling out to them. God isn't telling them, just reach up by your own bootstraps and, fix all your problems. No, he's calling them to be strong in himself. He's calling attention to himself. And another thing, I want you to notice the difference between how he addresses the people. In the second verse, he calls them the residue of the people. And in the 4th verse, he calls them the people of the land. He's reminding them, this is your land. This is the land that I promised you, that I gave you. And he's reminding them of his faithfulness and his strength as he delivered them from Egypt. He brought them into the land the first time and gave them the land, conquered the land for them. And he brought them back again, faithful to his promises. And it's just reminding these people, you're not just the residue of the people. You are the people of this land. And they had forgotten who their strength was. They had forgotten who had called them to this work. And he's reminding them, I'm your God. I'm the one that sent you here. And they could identify in his strength. And we're not Israel. We don't claim the promises of Israel in any sense, but we are God's children, and that's where we find our identity is in God. We find our strength from him, and our strength is only as big as us, okay? Our strength is very faulty and it's very failing, and I find that out every single day. That's why I drink coffee, okay? Let's just admit it. because I'm not strong, and sometimes I just need an extra boost. And discouragement overwhelms us when we realize all of our difficulties and all of the challenges that we face, and that they're so much bigger than ourselves and we can't control them. And the residue of Israel, they couldn't rebuild, they couldn't build the temple, they couldn't build something great on their own. And they realize this, and sometimes we have to come to that spot of where we're broken and we realize we can't face all the challenges. We're not, good enough. And that's when we can realize who we are. We're children of an almighty, powerful, strong, and faithful God. And in Christ, I believe it was Paul that said, we are more than conquerors. We are the children of God. And he gives us this admonition, be strong in me, and work. God's strength, wasn't just revealed to them to make them feel, powerful and conquering and, proud of who they were. God's strength is there to help them work, to help them, fulfill what God has given them to do. And I think sometimes as Christians, we just get so comfy in our identities as God's children. We're safe, we're not going to hell, we can just sort of live our lives. But we forget, what God's called us to. God's called us to do more than just, sit and be, nice Christians and be safe from hell. God called us to tell other people about his work. And, this wasn't just a command to pastors or missionaries. It was to every single saved individual. And believe me, I am so preaching to the choir right now because it's really easy to get comfy being a Christian. And, it's not talking, we're redeemed. Paul in Philippians talks about working out our salvation. And, it's not talking about, getting saved by works. It's, okay, now you're saved, so this should result in your working, in your showing Christ to other people. And God, here in Haggai, calls these people to work. And there is a time of solitude and away from people and meditation, but it's always with the purpose of going back to work, spending time with God, and then being able to go out and to actually work. God doesn't tell them, oh, okay, wait for things to get better, wait till all of your discouragement is gone. There's always, some better time that we could wait for to do things for God. And if we waited for the perfect time for God's work, we'd never do it. God's saying, okay, I showed myself to you. Be strong in me. Now go get to work. And then he gives us the reason why we can go to work. We can be strong. We can go to work because I am with you. It's not saying I was with you or I will be with you. He was with them presently. He is with us presently. This is to serve as a comfort. He's given them, an admonition to be strong. He's given them a command to be work. And this is a comforting source. This is the I am, the Lord of hosts. And he's with us. Just like he was in Israel, he's with us. And we can live in that reality that God is with us today. Because Israel's God is the same God. We serve the same powerful, amazing God. So we've looked at, the causes of this discouragement and, God's response to their encouragement. Let's look really quickly at some promises for the discouraged people. Verse 5 says, according to the word that I covenanted with you when you came out of Egypt, so my spirit remaineth among you. Fear not. He's reminding them again of his faithfulness. He's saying, look back, remember back, don't compare back, but look back. And remember, I brought you out of Egypt. I am the same God, and I will continue being that faithful and strong and powerful God. And then we see the result of his faithfulness. For verse 6, for thus saith the Lord of hosts, yet it is a little while, I will shake the heavens and the earth, and the sea and the dry land. And I will shake all nations, and the desire of all nations shall come, and I will fill this house with glory, saith the Lord of hosts. The silver is mine, the gold is mine, saith the Lord of hosts. The glory of this house shall be greater than the former, saith the Lord of hosts, and in this place will I give peace, saith the Lord of hosts. If you don't get it by this time, God is the Lord of hosts. He controls every single thing. And this, he's looked backwards now. He says, okay, you've looked backwards at Egypt. You've remembered, not compared, what I did there. Now let's look forward. He's giving them this future promises, because they can look at the past and they can see how great God is. And if that's not enough, he's looking forward and saying, okay, yet once, and it's a little while. This phrase is pushing them far into the future, even into our future. So this is a promise that still has remained unfulfilled. He talks about the shaking of the earth and the sea and the dry land, and this is very this language is talking about those last day events, the shaking, especially talking about the shaking of the earth and the sea and the world. That language is very often used with this futuristic revelatory events that are going to happen at the end of the world. And he's reminded there's nothing outside of his control. He controls all of this, and all the resources, gold and silver, they're all his. He's reminding them, I am this great God who controls everything. And again, that's revealed in his name that he's using, the Lord of hosts. And it's not only that his power is revealed, it's that his presence is revealed. He's saying, I will shake all the nations, and the desire of all nations shall come. I will fill this house with glory. And then skipping down to verse 9, the glory of this later house shall be greater than the former. He's promising his presence. And if you've studied Haggai or looked at commentaries, you know that there's a lot of debate about the phrase that says, and the desire of all nations shall come. And honestly, I was just reading through it again this week, just to get another handle on Haggai. And I've had this thought pop into my head. I'm like, what do all nations desire? They desire peace, right? Worldwide peace. It's like the goal of most rulers and nations, whether that is through war and them conquering everyone, or through, treaties and agreeing and stuff. But it really is peace. But really, they don't know what they're asking for. They don't know who or what they're seeking in peace. And when peace comes to the world, when there is worldwide peace, that comes through the person of Jesus Christ. Their concept, the nation's concept of peace, finds its epitome in the person of Christ. So really, this desire of all nations is Christ. It's the Son of God in peace. And he's saying, I'm going to give you this presence, and I'll fill this temple. And then there's this result from looking back on the promises from Egypt and looking forward to this amazing power and presence of God and how he's going to create this new heaven and new earth. There's hope. There's hope. You can hear this fervor and excitement as Haggai is telling us about this. God is in complete control, and he has glorious ends in mind. This inspires zeal. It inspires hope, because we don't have to live in despair, because we know the end of the story. It's not a hope. It's a confident assurance that God knows what he's doing. And we're not Israel. Israel has some very specific promises for what's going to happen when Christ comes back. But we can also look forward to the day when Christ returns and takes home his church, and all the sorrow and all the pain and all the confusion and discouragement will forever be gone. We can look forward with hope, and we can live today with peace and passion. We don't have to live in discouragement, because God is over all. We don't have to live comparing, because we are the children of God. our identity is found in God. In this message, we go from the pits of despair to the thralls of God's promises. It doesn't matter what work He's called you to, whether it's being a mom or a wife, a homemaker, a businesswoman, a sales rep, a teacher, wherever God finds you at, He'll provide us the strength to do it through Him. We can look to God and meditate on His Word. And as we do that, just watch the discouragement dissolve around you. I really hope that you enjoyed our study of Haggai today. I love it because this is something that I could preach to myself all day, every day, about discouragement and comparing myself and just getting sort of into the doldrums of the day. But just being reminded that God's in control and my identity is in Him is so absolutely amazing. But if this is your first time, go ahead and subscribe and ring the bell, or watch more videos and then subscribe. And continue to follow us. Continue to follow us in our Haggai series. We have 2 more to go, 2 more sermons from Haggai, so 2 more lessons to go. And I hope that this lesson was an encouragement to you. I hope you guys have a really good weekend, and we will see you again back on Friday. So bye, y'all.